Hello, this is Jerry, and welcome back to the book of Nehemiah, part 8, chapters 8 to 10. Now, last time we entered into the Feast of Trumpets with the Jews, and God deeply impressed his word upon them, as Ezra read to them the word all morning. They mourned and wept for their brokenness and sin before God, but then God turned their mourning into gladness and joy, because in the bigger picture, this was a time to rejoice. His people had come home to the Lord. Now let's re-enter the text. On the second day, the heads of fathers' houses of all the people, with the priests and the Levites, came together to Ezra the scribe in order to study the words of the law. Okay, the first day was the Feast of Trumpets, the first of 10 days of awe, leading to the Day of Atonement. On this second day, Ezra and the other spiritual leaders met with all the fathers. This was a big men's Bible study meeting. And they found it written in the law that the Lord had commanded by Moses that the people of Israel should dwell in booths during the feast of the 7th month. So in their reading, they came to the Feast of Booths, which is written in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Leviticus says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel, saying, On the 15th day of this 7th month, and for 7 days, is the Feast of Booths to the Lord. On the first day shall be a holy convocation. You shall not do any ordinary work. For 7 days you shall present food offerings to the Lord. On the 8th day you shall hold a holy convocation and present a food offering to the Lord. It is a solemn assembly. You shall do no ordinary work. You shall dwell in booths for 7 days. All native Israelites shall dwell in booths, that your generation may know that I made the people of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." Okay, so for 7 days they live in their shelters. And then on the 8th day, a solemn assembly to look back upon that experience with awe and reflection. Okay, back to Nehemiah. And that they should proclaim it and publish it all in their towns and in Jerusalem. Go out to the hills and bring branches of olive, wild olive, myrtle, palm, and other leafy trees to make booths, as it is written. So the people went out and brought them and made booths for themselves, each on his roof and in their courts, and in the courts of the house of God, and in the square at the water gate, and in the square at the gate of Ephraim. The whole company that had returned from exile built temporary shelters and lived in them. From the days of Joshua son of Nun until that day, the Israelites had not celebrated it like this, and their joy was very great. And day by day, from the first day, he read from the book of the law of God. They kept the feast 7 days, and on the 8th day there was a solemn assembly according to the rule. Okay, so the leaders first got the fathers involved in this because living in booths is a family activity that pictured God's care of the Hebrews in the wilderness. So Nehemiah said they had never celebrated booths like this with all this joy and enthusiasm and scripture reading. Now, on the 24th day of this month, the people of Israel were assembled with fasting and in sackcloth and with earth on their heads. Now, this is so interesting. They had gone through 3 feasts already: trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and booths in close succession. Booths went from the 15th to the 22nd, inclusively 8 days. So here on the 24th day of the month, Tishri, booths and that final solemn day would have ended 2 days prior. But here they were again, skipping their breakfast, donning sackcloth. The enormity of their national and individual sins were evidently still overwhelming them, and the Israelites separated themselves from all foreigners. Okay, twice before they had separated from pagan wives. But here I think the CSB Study Bible correctly notes, in this verse, the issue is not specifically foreign wives, but foreigners in general. God's chosen people, those of Israelite descent, were the ones who needed to confess, not the foreigners. And they stood and confessed their sins and the iniquities of their fathers. They confessed their own sins, and they confessed the sins of the generations behind them. This is a picture of 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. So, like other times in the Bible, they're identifying with the whole sinful nation, confessing the sins of the people. And there was an understanding of accumulated unrighteousness against God. And through the Bible, we see this intercession for others, don't we? A really powerful example is at the end of Job. After the Lord had spoken these words to Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, "My anger burns against you and against your two friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. Now therefore take 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and offer up a burnt offering for yourselves. And my servant Job shall pray for you, for I will accept his prayer to deal with you according to your folly. For you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has." So Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar went and did what the Lord had told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. Now, these 3 had something to learn here for sure, but see the power of intercessory prayer for the forgiveness of others, not claimed, only God forgives, but asked for. I also love at the beginning of Job, Job was regularly praying and making offerings to God for his many children in case they sinned. And I'm sure many of you already intercede this way for your families and our nation. Now imagine if the whole church was praying as Paul said to do, with supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings for all people. Imagine, so that if our prayers for others were like visible from space, we would see the whole world interlaced with prayer from God's people, the salt and light of this world. Perhaps in eternity we'll fathom something of how much God worked through our prayers to change history, to change people. Where would we be? Who would we be if no one ever prayed for us? Now, not to make God passive, because He is the one who burdens people to pray. And in the great mystery of prayer, He hears prayer and He changes people. And they stood up in their place and read from the book of the law of the Lord their God for a quarter of the day. For another quarter of it they made confession and worshipped the Lord their God. So some hours hearing the word and some hours confessing and worshiping. We see this in recorded revivals in history, where time collapses. People were not conscious of time or of food or of other worldly responsibilities, because of their immersion in truth and prayer and in worship. On the stairs of the Levites stood Jeshua, Bani, Kadmiel, Shebaniah, Bunni, Sherebiah, Bani, and Chenani. And they cried with a loud voice to the Lord their God. Then the Levites said, "Stand up and bless the Lord your God from everlasting to everlasting. Blessed be your glorious name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise." Now, from verse 6 all the way to verse 38, almost the rest of the chapter, we have the longest written prayer in the Bible. And we can't miss the historical consciousness in this prayer of how God graciously interacted with His people over the centuries. Now, one of these Levites led this prayer, which I'll read straight through with just some Bible references added on the slides. And in your minds, stand next to the Jews in the water gate and hear this Levite pray. "You are the Lord, you alone. You have made heaven the heaven of heavens with all their host, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them, and you preserve all of them, and the host of heaven worships you. You are the Lord, the God who chose Abram and brought him out of Ur of the Chaldeans and gave him the name Abraham. You found his heart faithful before you and made with him the covenant to give to his offspring the land of Canaan, the Hittite and the Amorite and the Perizzite, the Jebusite and the Girgashite. And you have kept your promise, for you are righteous. And you saw the affliction of your fathers in Egypt, and heard their cry at the Red Sea, and performed signs and wonders against Pharaoh and all his servants, and all the people of his land. For you knew that they acted arrogantly against your fathers, and you have made a name for yourself, as it is to this day. And you divided the sea before them, so that they went through the midst of the sea on dry land, and you cast their pursuers into the depths, as a stone into the mighty waters. By a pillar of cloud you led them in the day, and by a pillar of fire in the night, to light for them the way in which they should go. You came down on Mount Sinai and spoke with them from heaven, and gave them right rules and true laws, good statutes and commandments. And you made known to them your holy Sabbath, and commanded them commandments and statutes, and a law by Moses your servant. You gave them bread from heaven for their hunger, and brought water from them out of the rock for their thirst. And you told them to go to possess the land that you have sworn to give them. But they and our fathers acted presumptuously, and stiffened their neck, and did not obey your commandments. They refused to obey, and were not mindful of the wonders that you performed among them. But they stiffened their neck, and appointed a leader to return to slavery in Egypt. But you are a God ready to forgive, gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and did not forsake them. Even when they had made for themselves a golden calf, and said, This is your God who brought you up out of Egypt, and had committed great blasphemies, you in your great mercies did not forsake them in the wilderness. The pillar of cloud to lead them in the way did not depart from them by day, nor the pillar of fire by night to light for them the way which they should go. You gave your good spirit to instruct them, and did not withhold your manna from their mouth, and give them water for their thirst. 40 years you sustained them in the wilderness, and they lacked nothing. Their clothes did not wear out, and their feet did not swell. And you gave them kingdoms and peoples, and allotted to them every corner, so that they took possession of the land of Sihon, king of Heshbon, and the land of Og, king of Bashan. You multiplied their children as the stars of heaven, and you brought them into the land that you told their fathers to enter and possess, so that the descendants went in and possessed the land. And you subdued before them the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, and gave them into their hand, with their kings and the peoples of the land, that they might do with them as they would. And they captured fortified cities and a rich land, and took possession of houses full of all good things, cisterns already hewn, vineyards, olive orchards, and fruit trees in abundance. So they ate and were filled, and became fat, and delighted themselves in your great goodness. Nevertheless, they were disobedient, and rebelled against you, and cast your law behind their back, and killed your prophets who had warned them, in order to turn them back to you, and they committed great blasphemies. Therefore you gave them into the hand of their enemies, who made them suffer. And in the time of their suffering they cried out to you, and you heard them from heaven. And according to your great mercies you gave them saviors, who saved them from the hand of their enemies. But after they had rest, they did evil again before you, and you abandoned them to the hand of their enemies, so that they had dominion over them. Yet when they turned and cried out to you, you heard from heaven, and many times you delivered them according to your mercies. And you warned them in order to turn them back to your law. Yet they acted presumptuously and did not obey your commandments, but sinned against your rules. Which if a person does them, he shall live by them. And they turned a stubborn shoulder, and stiffened their neck, and would not obey. Many years you bore with them, and warned them by your Spirit through your prophets. Yet they would not give ear. Therefore you gave them into the hands of the people of the lands. Nevertheless, in your great mercies, you did not make an end of them or forsake them, for you are a gracious and merciful God. Now therefore, our God, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God, who keeps covenant and steadfast love, let not all the hardship seem little to you that has come upon us, upon our kings, our princes, our priests, our prophets, our fathers, and all your people, since the time of the kings of Assyria until this day. Yet you have been righteous in all that has come upon us, for you have dealt faithfully, and we have acted wickedly. Our kings, our princes, our priests, and our fathers have not kept your law or paid attention to your commandments and your warnings that you gave them. Even in their own kingdom, and amid your great goodness that you gave them, and in the large and rich land that you set before them, they did not serve you or turn from their wicked works. Behold, we are slaves this day. In the land that you gave to our fathers to enjoy its fruit and its good gifts, behold, we are slaves. And its rich yield goes to the kings whom you have set over us because of our sins. They rule over our bodies and over our livestock as they please, and we are in great distress. Well, that's the prayer. And in verse 38, it reads, because of all of this, we make a firm covenant in writing. On the sealed document are the names of our princes, our Levites, and our priests. And then there follows in chapter 10 a long list of names of those who signed this covenant. And they assembled everyone who was able to understand, and they committed themselves to, quote, walk in God's law that was given by Moses, the servant of God, and to observe and do all the commandments of the Lord our God, and his rules and his statutes, which included specifically not to intermarry with pagans, to keep the Sabbath, to give a third of a shekel annually to the temple maintenance, and other matters of the temple upkeep. So all this prayer was not just talk, but there were real fruits of repentance and change here. And there are two things that struck me about this long prayer. First, the great contrast in this prayer as to who God is and who his people are, and what God has done and what his people have done. The Lord is great, mighty, awesome, merciful, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, good, long-suffering, the only God, and the creator and sustainer of all. But his people are stiff-necked, stubborn, rebellious, disobedient, presumptuous of God, and not mindful of God's wonders. The Lord has called Abram, that is, Abraham, and kept his promises to him, delivered them from slavery in Egypt through many wonders, instructed them and given them his law, sustained and guided his people in the wilderness. The Lord has grown the nation like stars, generously given them fruitful lands, delivered them from enemies in Canaan, been righteous in all his actions, kept his covenant, given many warnings, and many times forgiven and delivered them. While his people have tried to return to Egypt, killed the Lord's prophets who were warning them, committed many blasphemies, not heeded his warnings or listened, not turned from their wickedness, but regularly repeated their evils. Such a staggering contrast. It's so important we keep a clear appreciation of that great distance. Now, not distance in aloofness, but in difference between God and us in his character, in holiness, in the love of God. which nurtures us to fear Him in that healthy biblical way and to be obedient and dependent on Him. And the second thing that strikes me is that after rehearsing all these terrible failings, still, at the end, he prays basically, Lord, would you please help and rescue us again? There's faith here based on who God is and what He has done throughout Israel's history, being a gracious and merciful God. So, despite being totally unworthy, he asks for God's help once again. And this truth stretches from Genesis to Revelation. We're never worthy, we're never deserving, but we can submit humbly to a very generous, gracious, and merciful God. Have you ever noticed that so often in the Gospels, those who needed healing weren't calling out, heal us, or heal me? It was usually, Jesus, have mercy on me. They connected God's power in their behalf as being an expression of His mercy. And this long prayer is a great reminder for us of asking once again for His mercy and help. Don't stop. All of God's people, from Adam and Eve to the present, so many millions, have not or could not exhaust God's mercies. As Lamentations 3 says, they are new every morning. Well, next week, Lord willing, we will finally see the formal dedication of the walls. So warm up your singing voices and bring your ancient instruments. We'll see you then. Thanks very much.